At its peak, this place was louder than thunder. The sound hit you before you even got close. A wall of noise. Cattle bellowing. Hogs squealing. Chains rattling. Men shouting over machinery that never stopped. Not for a single hour. Not for a single day. Then came the smell. Not just a bad smell. Something else entirely. Something that doesn't really exist in the modern world anymore. Blood. Warm, iron-heavy blood. Released in such vast quantities. It ran in rivers through concrete channels beneath your feet. Mixed with it, manure from thousands of animals packed into pens, baking in the Chicago heat. Steam from rendering vats, where what couldn't be eaten was boiled into lard, glue, fertilizer, and the caustic bite of chemicals used to clean the kill floors. And underneath all of it, permanent, inescapable, the smell of death. It coated your throat, soaked into clothes, into skin, into homes. People who lived nearby could never fully wash it out. Visitors would arrive, take one breath, and leave. Chicago had a name for the invisible cloud that hung over the South Side. The stockyard stench. And inside that stench was a city within a city. 40,000 workers, 500 acres, 13,000 animal pens, 300 miles of railroad track feeding into a single point. At its peak, this place processed 82% of all the meat eaten in the United States. Every steak, every Christmas ham, every school lunch, every soldier's ration in 2 world wars. It all came from here, from a single square mile on the south side of Chicago, called the Union Stockyards. And then one day, after 106 years of feeding a nation, it closed. The workers scattered, the buildings came down, and the city within a city slowly disappeared. Today, one limestone gate stands alone in an industrial park, and most people drive past it without even knowing what it is. How does something this massive just vanish? This is the story of the place that kept America from starving, and the city that disappeared without a trace. To understand what the Union Stockyards meant, you have to understand what America looked like in 1865. The Civil War had just ended. The country was bleeding, broken, and hungry. The population was pushing west. Cattle ranches were spreading across Texas and Kansas. But there was a problem no one had solved. How do you get meat from the prairies to the tables of New York, Boston, and Philadelphia? Chicago had the answer. In 1865, 9 railroad companies looked at a map and saw what others hadn't acted on. Chicago sat at the center of everything. Rails running east, west, north, and south. A natural funnel between the cattle country of the plains and the hungry cities of the east. On Christmas Day, 1865, they came together and opened the Union Stockyards on 320 acres of marshland on Chicago's south side. From day one, and it was the largest livestock market in the world. Within 5 years, it doubled in size. Within 10, it became the economic engine of an entire city. The railroads brought the cattle in, and the packers, men like Philip Armour and Gustavus Swift, built their plants right beside the yards. And then they changed everything. Before this, meat was local. A butcher in Boston bought cattle raised nearby. A family in Philadelphia ate pork from the next county. Every city had its own system. Inefficient, inconsistent, expensive. Gustavus Swift looked at that system and decided to destroy it. In the 1870s, he invested in refrigerated railcars, insulated boxcars packed with ice. For the first time, meat could be processed in Chicago and shipped hundreds of miles without spoiling. And an animal slaughtered on Monday could be on a dinner table in New York by Thursday, fresh. Local butchers couldn't compete. Neither could local slaughterhouses. Within a generation, the entire system collapsed into one place. Chicago. The meat on your table no longer came from a farm you could visit, or a butcher you knew. It came from the yards. Philip Armour pushed it even further. He perfected the disassembly line, turning animals into products step by step with ruthless efficiency. He once said, "We use everything from the pig but the squeal." And he meant it. From the yards came foods that spread across the country: canned meats, bacon, ham, products that could sit on shelves and feed families anywhere. But what they really created was something bigger, a system. The modern food supply chain, mass production, preservation, branding, nationwide distribution. Before the yards, meat was occasional. After the yards, it was every day. The American diet changed forever, and the workers came from everywhere. Irish immigrants, Polish families, Lithuanians, Czechs, Germans, African Americans fleeing the post-war South, Mexican families looking for work. By 1900, more than 30 nationalities worked inside the yards. They built a neighborhood around it. They called it Packingtown. And Packingtown was alive, in a way that's almost impossible to explain to someone who only knew suburbs and shopping malls. Packingtown wasn't just a neighborhood. It was an entire civilization built around one industry. Within walking distance of the stockyard gates were 75 saloons. Not because the workers were drunks, but because before labor protections, a saloon was the only place a working man could sit, hear news, argue, organize, and feel human for an hour. There were Polish Catholic churches, Lithuanian Catholic churches, Irish Catholic churches, all within blocks of each other. Because even in the same faith, each community needed a place that spoke its language and buried its dead its own way. Markets sold food from the old country. Newspapers printed in 6 languages. Boxing gyms. Mutual aid societies. If someone got hurt on the kill floor, and people got hurt, that was the only thing standing between their family and starvation. Oh, the smell was everywhere. So constant it became part of the neighborhood's identity. Even its humor. Kids had a rhyme. Roses are red, skies are blue. Stockyard stinks, and so do you. A joke. But not really. The smell didn't stay at the gates. It came home. Into kitchens. Into church pews. Into clothes and skin. If you were from Packingtown, you carried it with you. And then there was the work. Walk onto the kill floor, and the first thing that hits you isn't the noise. It's the heat. An animal's body holds an enormous amount of warmth. Multiply that by thousands a day, and the air becomes heavy, suffocating. Within an hour, workers were drenched, dizzy, and the process never stopped. Cattle arrived by rail, packed tight, stressed after days of travel. They were driven into holding pens, thousands at a time, then into narrow chutes. And the design was intentional. A steer in a chute its exact width cannot turn around, cannot see what's ahead. It just walks, forward, into the killing floor. In the early years, a man called the knocker used a pole axe, a single blow to the skull. If he was skilled, the animal dropped instantly. If he wasn't, it didn't. Within seconds, the body was chained and lifted onto an overhead rail. From there, it moved, station to station. By the 1900s, the poleaxe was replaced by the captive bolt pistol. Faster, more reliable. Then came the sticking, a knife to the throat, and the blood. Hot, pressurized, running into channels beneath the floor. At peak capacity, it never stopped. From there, the body was taken apart piece by piece. Hide removed, head cut, organs sorted, fat rendered. Everything used. And what remained was split into 2 sides of beef, sent into cooling rooms, dropping from intense heat to near freezing in minutes. Then to the cutting floor, trimmed, packed, loaded onto railcars. The entire process, from a living animal to packaged meat, took less than 40 minutes. 40 minutes, thousands of times a day, 6 days a week, for over a century. The scale is almost impossible to grasp. At its peak, more than 18 million animals passed through these yards in a single year, and the workers lived inside it. They moved between extreme heat and freezing cold in the same shift. Frostbite, heat exhaustion. The floors were always wet. Blood, water, condensation. Knives were everywhere, always sharp. One mistake, one slip, could cost fingers. A hand. And if you were injured, nothing. No compensation, no safety net. You healed at home, without pay. And if you couldn't come back, someone else took your place. The hours were long. The pay was low. The smell never left. And yet, they were proud, because what they were doing mattered. Every day, their work fed millions. One retired worker said it best. We knew we weren't glamorous, but we knew we were necessary. And there's a dignity in that no one can take away. By 1906, 40,000 people worked in the yards. It generated $200 million a year. It was the beating heart of Chicago. And Chicago was the beating heart of America. The decades between 1900 and 1950 were the golden age of the yards. 2 world wars turned the Union stockyards into something even more than a business. They became a military necessity. During World War I, the yards ran around the clock, feeding American troops overseas. The workers knew their labor meant the difference between soldiers eating or going hungry in the trenches of France. But it was during World War II that the system reached its peak. Rationing meant civilians ate less so soldiers could eat more. And the yards, now staffed largely by women with many men overseas, kept the lines moving without pause. They processed the rations that followed American troops across the world, through North Africa, Italy, Normandy, the Pacific. Millions of tins. Food that could survive long journeys, harsh conditions, yet and still keep a soldier alive. The connection between this place and American military power wasn't symbolic. It was logistical. Without the yards, the war effort would have looked very different. And when the soldiers came home in 1945, they came home to a country that was booming, and the yards boomed with it. The late 1940s and early 1950s were the fullest the neighborhoods had ever been. Churches packed, schools overflowing, bars on Saturday night, standing room only. Men came back from war, reclaimed their jobs, and bought small houses within walking distance of the gates. Their wives joined church groups. Their children played in the streets until the lights came on. And on Sundays, families sat down to meals that, in some quiet way, the fathers had helped provide. Not just for themselves, but for the entire country. It wasn't a wealthy life, but it was a full one. And no one, not in those crowded pews, not in those streets filled with children, imagined it would ever end. The end didn't come all at once. That's what made it so devastating. It came the way a slow leak destroys a foundation. You don't notice it until the floor caves in. The first cracks appeared in the early 1950s, and they came from 2 directions at once. The first was refrigerated trucks. For decades, the Union stockyards had worked on a simple idea: bring cattle to one central place, process them, then ship the meat out. Chicago made that system possible. But the logic was already changing. Back in the 1870s, Gustavus Swift had proven that processed meat could travel long distances without spoiling. By the post-war years, that idea had moved from rail to road. Refrigerated trucks were now reliable, affordable, and everywhere. The second force was the interstate highway system. In 1956, as the Federal Aid Highway Act launched 41,000 miles of high-speed highways connecting the country. Suddenly, trucks could move faster, farther, and more efficiently than ever before. And together, these 2 forces broke the system. Why ship a live animal to Chicago, pay to process it, then ship the meat again, when you could slaughter it in Iowa or Kansas and drive it straight to New York? Cheaper, faster, fresher. The logic that built Chicago was gone. The big packers, Armour, Swift, Wilson, saw it first. Quietly, they began building new plants closer to the cattle. away from Chicago, away from unions. The United Packing House Workers of America had spent decades fighting for better wages, safer conditions, basic dignity, and they had won. But the new plants didn't have those costs. They were non-union, lower pay, fewer protections. Yet the companies didn't have to fight the unions. They just had to leave. And they did. The yards didn't collapse overnight. They shrank. In 1955, more than 30,000 workers. By 1960, under 20,000. By 1965, under 10,000. Each drop meant something real. A family leaving, a storefront going dark, a bar closing, a church merging because there weren't enough people left to fill the pews. The people who stayed watched their world disappear, block by block, year by year. Then, in the summer of 1971, a fire tore through what remained of the yards. The buildings were already aging, half empty. The damage was catastrophic. But more importantly, it forced a question no one had wanted to answer. Was there any reason left to rebuild? There wasn't. On July 30th, 1971, the Union stockyards closed for good. 106 years, gone. The last cattle were processed. And the last workers clocked out. The gates closed. And Packingtown, with its 30 nationalities, its 75 saloons, its generations of pride, was left with nothing. What happened to Packingtown after 1971 is a story that should be told in every history class in America. But it isn't. The workers who had built their lives within walking distance of those gates had nowhere to go. Many were too old to retrain. Many had skills that only existed inside the meatpacking industry. The union that had fought for decades couldn't create jobs that no longer existed. So people left. The young left first, then the families with children, then the ones who could find work anywhere else. What remained were the elderly, the infirm, and those with nowhere else to go. The neighborhood began to empty out. Churches that once held hundreds now saw a few dozen people on Sundays. Parish schools closed, storefronts went dark, the last saloons stayed open, but barely. Old men sat quietly at the bar, not saying much. That's because there wasn't much left to say. By the late 1970s, Packingtown was dying. Buildings that had housed generations fell into disrepair. Some were demolished, some burned, and stayed empty because there was no reason to rebuild. This was a community that had survived Prohibition, 2 world wars, the Great Depression, a community that had fed a nation. And it couldn't survive the simple fact that it was no longer needed. By the 1980s, Packingtown was gone. The people scattered across the city, the suburbs, other states. Their children grew up somewhere else. Their grandchildren have no memory of the place. The buildings came down, the streets changed, the rail lines were torn up, and today, almost nothing remains. Just a single limestone gate standing alone in the middle of an industrial park. No noise, no crowds, no cattle. And no city within a city, just a monument to something that once fed an entire nation and then disappeared. Today, if you drive to the corner of Exchange Avenue and Peoria Street on the south side of Chicago, you'll find an industrial park, warehouses, logistics companies, parking lots, chain-link fences. It looks like 10,000 other industrial parks in 10,000 other American cities. Nothing about it makes you slow down. Nothing makes you stop, except one thing. Standing alone against the flat landscape is a limestone gate, 2 stone pillars, an arch, and above it, carved into the stone, the head of a bull. It's the original entrance to the Union stockyards, built in 1879. It's the only thing left. No museum, no crowds, no grand memorial telling you what this place once was. Just a few plaques most people never stop to read, and a stone gate, standing alone in a parking lot. Most people who see it don't know what it is. They assume it's decorative, something added later, something that doesn't really matter. They don't know that, beyond that gate, 40,000 people reported to work every morning. that the sound could be heard a mile away, that the smell clung to your clothes for days. They don't know that entire communities, entire lives, were built in its shadow. They don't know that the hot dog at a baseball game, the canned corned beef in a pantry, the bacon on a breakfast plate, all trace back to what was built here, that the modern grocery store, the packaged food on a shelf, the national food supply chain, all of it began behind that gate. They don't know, because almost nothing here stops you long enough to learn. And that might be the most devastating part of all. Not the closing, not the demolition, not even the loss of the community, but the forgetting, the quiet total disappearance of the people who fed a nation, and were, in the end, forgotten. Here's what history books don't tell you about a place like this. They can give you the dates, the acreage, the tonnage, the names of the men who got rich from it. What they can't give you is what it felt like to be there, to grow up in its shadow, to carry its smell home in your clothes, to build a life around its rhythms, and then watch it disappear. That knowledge lives in one place, in the people who were there, in the workers who stood on those floors, in the children who grew up in Packingtown, in the grandparents who, if you asked while they were still alive, would go quiet for a moment before telling you something no book ever could. Maybe your grandmother remembered the shift whistle at 6 a.m. and how the whole neighborhood moved with it like a single heartbeat. Maybe your grandfather told you about the cold in the coolers, the kind that settled into your bones and stayed there through the weekend. Maybe someone described the smell on a summer afternoon in a way that made you push your dinner plate away. If someone ever told you about this place firsthand, that was a gift. Because those voices are almost gone. And when they're gone, all that remains is what got written down. Which is never the whole story. It's never even close. There was a woman named Margaret, interviewed in a Chicago oral history project in 2003. She worked at the yards from 1948 to 1968. Her father had worked there before her husband, two of her brothers. She was 78 when she gave the interview. She hadn't been back in years. Didn't see the point, she said. But she remembered everything. The shift whistle at 6 a.m., the cold in the coolers, the women she worked alongside, from Poland, from Mexico, from Mississippi, and how they looked out for each other in ways no record ever captured. And the smell, even after 30 years. When they asked her about it, she paused. "You never really lose it," she said. "Some mornings I still wake up and for just a second, I can smell it, like it's still there, like I'm still there." She remembered the last day, July 30th, 1971. How quiet it was. How wrong that quiet felt. "We fed this country," she said. "For 100 years we fed this country. And then they acted like we were never there." The Union stockyards of Chicago fed a nation for 106 years. They built the modern food system. They fed soldiers through 2 world wars. They turned meat from a luxury into something millions depended on every day. And they did it on the backs of 40,000 workers who built lives, families, and communities in the shadow of those walls, and were left with nothing when those walls came down. Today, a stone gate stands in an empty parking lot on the south side of Chicago, the only thing left that remembers. And now, so do you.